Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership. Tinna Jackson joins me today. She is the author of The Power Play Journal and founder of Jackson Consulting Group. And after years of working across government, business, and nonprofits, she helps leaders navigate power and politics with clarity and confidence. Tinna, welcome to the show.
Yes, Emily. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful. So can you just give us a brief background of who you are and how you got to what you're doing now?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C. It's the powerhouse of power, right? And so I spent the majority of my career in national politics. 10 and a half years of that time was spent in the U.S. Senate, and half of that time was as Deputy Chief of Staff.
Beautiful. Well, let's start there because I know we have chiefs of staff listening who ears just perked up. So tell us about your time as Deputy Chief of Staff for a member of the Senate.
Yeah, it was not without difficulty. Right. When you're working for someone high profile, any CEO would be high profile, right? It Again, not without difficulty. It was a lot of losing sleep, I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely a tough balance between, helping someone with their mission, organizing their priorities, and helping them determine what their priorities should be based on the landscape you're seeing, and reconciling that with the landscape that they see. So, on top of that was also managing the day-to-day pop-ups of staff drama, right? I mean, any chief of staff, chief of stuff, whatever. It's just, dealing with personnel was a big chunk of that because we're all working together to move the work. And, someone has a bad day, they want to talk to you about it, which is interesting because clearly you've gotten to a point where staff trusts you.
Yeah.
That's very important. But with that comes less time for you to download and take a breather and, reconcile your own thoughts. It was just a constant go, 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 but a tough balance between the rest that you need to recharge and do it all over again the next day to, being effective in your role consistently on a daily basis. Especially when the boss has a question or has a bright idea that they've gotten in the middle of the night, and who do they call? The chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, or the person that they trust the most.
Yeah.
So I'm sure everyone, all the chiefs of staff, go through.
There's lots of nodding heads listening. Yes, and I'm curious, were you interacting with the chief of staff, with the senator? Who was your kind of primary point of contact?
Primary point of contact with this was the senator.
Okay.
And the chief of staff equally, because at some point, when you're working for a politico, if you will, the chief of staff is sort of on the same level as the member in many ways, right? The member is the talking head, the mouthpiece, the person that is out and about kissing babies and, meeting with constituents. The chief of staff is on the back end doing kind of the back end work and the strategizing and the fundraising to keep that member in office, right? And so then there's my position that was somewhat supporting both of them in different ways, right? I would be the first line of defense for the senator. I would even manage up to the chief of staff and keep that person aware of what was going on, having a pulse. Because as you get close to an election cycle, the chief of staff can't be internal. The chief of staff has to then become externally facing with the senator, right? With the politico, with the member. And then the day-to-day is all on me. It is all on me. And also, having a history, I had been with that member for 10 years.
Okay.
So I went from being the executive aide to then becoming, director of administration and deputy chief of staff. I have been and has seen all of the intricacies of the organization as a whole, from looking at the numbers and the budget to actually doing the hiring of a lot of the positions that I managed, and then managing multiple offices across the state of Nevada and in Washington, D.C. Yeah.
And I'm always curious when you're talking about public office, they have a fixed tenure, so 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. And what does that do to the dynamic of the role? You kind of mentioned, hey, when certain cycles come up, chief of staff goes from internal to external along with their member. Is there any, I'm just curious about the difference between public sector and private sector where, CEO could be as short as a year or could be as long as, decades and decades. So I'm just curious about that dynamic.
Yeah, a 6-year term for the Senate, and if you're in the House of Representatives, it's 2 years, which
Yep.
is tough because it's a constant election. You're constantly up for reelection, and so you cannot afford to ignore your constituents at all. In the Senate, there's a little bit of leeway in that you can slow walk a lot of things. You could be more methodical.
Mm.
You can take time to determine what you're going to get involved in, how you're going to get there, and employ the strategy. So certainly a lot of strategy involved.
Yes, and our founding fathers set that up that way on purpose. So, to their great wisdom. But thank you for sharing that. That's super interesting. So, going from public office to office politics, which is what you kind of talk about now in lots of different realms, what do people think about when they hear leadership and employee performance? Those are two big terms, but what kind of comes up in your world when you start talking about those things?
Well, I can tell you there's an absence of emotional intelligence. I can tell you that. Think, a lot of people think leadership is having a title, right?
No.
CEO, COO, director of this, senior director of that. Some people think that it's title driven. Others think that it's influence driven. And I can't necessarily disagree with that. I think that there are a lot of people scattered throughout organizations that do have a level of trust and influence, more so than the person that's well above them. And that can be tricky for the people that are above in these C-level positions because the more influential people are the ones who have a real pulse on the organization. The person who actually knows the truth about what's going on. And they can be very powerful because they have information that could either help move the organization further, forward if they're in a position to choose to share that information, or they withhold it and watch things crumble.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're working with teams or leaders who are dealing with office politics, and I mean, I always say, look, if you're dealing with two or more humans, you're going to have conflict and disagreement, and that can be productive and fine. It also can be toxic and can bury you. But what kind of things are you seeing and facing and talking to the people you work with about in terms of like office politics and dynamics and these two team members butt heads and these two whole departments can't get along?
I can tell you that communication is always the breakdown.
Mm.
Communication is always an issue in every single organization, from written communication to, once you finally do get together and it's the verbal breakdown, it's also the nonverbal communication.
Ah, yeah.
The person what they think, and you can see it in their face.
Doesn't match up. Yeah, what you're saying doesn't match your face.
Feeling. So there's that. But, the other part is, I think that because we've been remote for so long,
Hmm.
it's broken down how we can build with our team members. I really do. I really do believe that. There was a time, before COVID, maybe if you sent an email, you thought twice because you could just walk down to the person's office, stick your head in, and just have a conversation, and it's done, right? Now, and I think this has always been the case with email, you're doing a lot of CYA. You're keeping more records, right? It's tough. And Zoom helps. Don't get me wrong, it does, but it's just very different not being in person and building a better rapport with your colleagues. So I do think communication is the big piece. I think we've forgotten how to communicate effectively though, and actually kind of meaning what we say
Mm.
without having to over clarify. The truth of the matter is a lot of organizations are under resourced, right? We've seen news reports, a lot of the federal governments, a lot of positions that have gone away. Even corporate entities are now releasing thousands of people. So the people that are left holding the bag, holding the work. They have to figure things out. And so
Yeah.
people are constantly either burnt out, frustrated, and they have to find a way to communicate their concerns without any backlash of adding to the numbers of departures.
Yeah. So you've mentioned some things that are a little bit, tricky, with people not being in person and people communicating to kind of, CYA. What would you advocate doing in these, like if you are in a remote position or a remote setup or even hybrid, what are some things that you can do to communicate positively and effectively?
I would probably do more. I would probably do I'm assuming that people do their one-on-ones, right? And do their group meetings, their group team meetings. But I would probably do something like a group game night or something, right? Online, do a wind down, Thursday wind down happy hour, or do a morning coffee. Like just everyone get online and, do a quick coffee chat, a stand-up meeting with coffee. I would do like lunch and learns. I would provide professional development opportunities. Any way to get people communicating more.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was chief of staff, our CEO and COO and I would go play top golf just every once in a while, just to like sit there, like hit the ball, eat some food and just kind of hang out. And sometimes we talked about work and sometimes we didn't. And it was just kind of sitting back and easing into like just being around this person and developing relationships outside of the what is the status update for this initiative type of thing. So I think that goes a long way. You had mentioned leadership as it's not a title, which I totally agree with. It can be influence, certainly, but that's maybe not the whole picture. You mentioned we're lacking emotional intelligence, with which I can see all over the place. How does ego and leadership go together? What's the interplay between ego and leadership?
Yeah, I think they're different kinds of ego, right? Like I think you do have to have some level of confidence and boldness when you choose to go for a promotion and take on a leadership role where you are managing other people and also managing the output, the outcomes of those
Yep.
individuals, right? But the unhealthy ego, where someone is not self aware and they are fully in belief that because I am chief this, that you have to do what I say when I say it.
Ooh.
And some things may not make logical sense. I think that there are a lot of people, and I hope that's not true, but I do believe that there are just a lot of people that can't handle what leadership really is. I do believe that leadership is very simple. Just be the good person. Like remember the boss. We all remember the great bosses we had. We also are probably scarred by the bad bosses. My thing is don't leave a scar. Okay. Very simple. Don't leave a
Do
scar.
no
What
harm.
right. And what does that mean? Like, if you hear that someone is not doing well, check in on. I'm not saying spend an hour. I'm saying stop by and just say, how are you doing? And mean it. Because if the tables were turned, you would need that too.
Hmm. Yeah.
Have a little bit of empathy.
Yeah.
It'll come up on you sometimes, and that's a great thing. I do think that some people carry their own baggage in leadership, coats of armor that are very
Hmm.
difficult to break down. I think people walk into these positions lacking trust of themselves, which then
Ah.
manifests into micromanagement. Right? I mean, I've had to give people strategies on how do you manage a micromanager? Well, you give them all the information up front so they don't have time to ask you what the status of that. Just beat them to the punch. You know they're going to ask you. Just beat them to the punch.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people go, "I'm the CEO," or "I'm the COO," and therefore, like, there's a double-edged sword. I know the right answer, so just do what I say, as you mentioned before. And also, like, I'm unsure, so I'm going to sit here and waffle and kind of be unclear to the team, and that's like sometimes equally as damaging. There's so many things you brought up. I have so many things going on in my head. But it's kind of the performative aspect of leadership where it's like, let me do these things because this is what a CEO is supposed to be doing. So I'm going to do these things in a performative way, a kind of disingenuous way. And then, like you said, like asking someone, like, hey, how are you doing? And mean it. That's a big piece I see missing where it's like we can say the words, we can say the right words, and we can say the political things, but we're not actually just dropping down to a human level and saying like, how are you doing? Seriously.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are a lot of leaders who have an idea of what leadership is instead of defining what leadership looks like for them.
Mm.
I'm sure that there are all kinds of images and ideas of what leaders are supposed to do. I think that what you're supposed to do is take care of your staff and be open, honest, and clear with them so that whatever mission or vision you have, the people will stand next to you and push you forward as the leader and follow you. That comes with helping them transform into the leaders they need to be, to lead their teams too. And you're right. There are others who waffle because they're just not sure. They're so indecisive. They're paralyzed
Yeah.
by indecision. And instead of admitting, it's okay. Hey, hey, I need some help on this. What do you guys think? This is the situation. What do you guys think?
That's powerful, but that's so powerful.
Not necessarily admitting that you don't know what to do. You're just asking for feedback. They are in the trenches, they are doing the work, they are managing the systems, they're developing the plans, and you're coming up with the vision. So it's okay to go grassroots level and figure out what's going on in the field.
They might get you to a better answer because they're closer to it. They see it from a
Yeah.
different perspective. Absolutely. Yeah.
And they have the data. So ask the questions. The ones who are not asking the questions, I think, are more problematic
That's more
because,
scary.
yeah, they're moving forward, making decisions. They have no, and that goes to trust. When your staff doesn't trust you, oh,
Breakdown.
that's when you start to break down and people start to leave.
Yeah. So, Tina, I get so many questions from people who go, well, I can't do this because this person is higher than me, like power dynamics, hierarchy. I mean, like, this is just how they feel. This is my boss and my boss's boss, and there's nothing I can do. What would you say to a person who's in that power dynamic situation?
I would say, have you tried talking with them or asking them first before you say that? Because there's a fear there, right? People immediately think, I can't because,
Mm.
instead of thinking, what if I did and it works out really well?
Ah,
A lot of this is reframing and kind of getting over that fear. As a supervisor, manager, leader, you have a responsibility to your team. You have a responsibility to be available and to provide direction when it's needed and clarity when it's needed. And if someone is fearful that they can't ask a question or they can't step forward and offer support, that's a problem. It's either an internal problem with them or that leader has put them in a position to think and feel that they're not open, that they're not reachable, they're not accessible.
yeah. I was just talking to someone the other day, and they were in a situation where they have tried, and they've seen other people trying. They get shot down. Those other people just get shot down. And so she's like, I've said my piece, but this is just a battle I'm not going to win. So I'm just going to have to sit here and like take it basically. Is that okay, that might be a situation if it's so bad, comprehensively so bad, you might need to look at other opportunities and get yourself out of that situation. Or if it's, hey, this is not ideal, but it's the situation we're in right now for a temporary period of time. How would you guide that person who's like, I've tried, I really have, and it doesn't work?
Yeah, I think every leader has a primary influencer,
Mm.
whether it's the chief of staff, whether it is a senior advisor or someone. There has to be someone that these people can go to and say, hey, I have these concerns. I'm hitting a brick wall. I'm afraid that if we don't do X, this could happen. Right. And I think that anytime you try to hit someone with a pain point, there's got to be some relief somehow. And if the staff are willing to provide the support to make sure that that relief, occurs, that's a great thing. But I think it's important to figure out who these influential people are so that when you're running into these roadblocks, that you can go to those people, those individuals that can support the staff in getting to that principal's ear.
And I love what you said there. I want chiefs of staff to go back and listen because very likely you are that person. for your
Mhm.
executive and for your team. So being that person who they can come to and say, here's like the solution, but here's the issue, and here's I need someone to really listen to this and make sure that the principal knows about it. And you can deliver it whatever way you want, chief of staff. You can buffer it, but I need to know that this message is getting through. So I think that's so, so important. So thank you. Do you deal a lot with nonprofits? So I'm wondering, is there a slightly different power dynamic with a for-profit and a nonprofit entity?
Somewhat. I think nonprofits are a little more difficult because, there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of passion, mission-driven work going on. But that doesn't mean that the executive director or the president and CEO knows how to manage
Mm,
anything. So there's that clash of passion and vision versus motivation and execution. And if you don't have the right leader that can help make good decisions on employing the right staff, the organization is going to flail a little bit.
mm,
Things are going to move slowly, and it could be an issue for funders, for board members. Word travels really fast when things aren't going well. And so, these nonprofits have to deal with boards,
yeah,
right? You've got boards who have a different view, different viewpoint of what's going on in whatever landscape they're in. And you have CEOs and executive directors who are trying to move a vision forward. Sometimes they are both not in alignment. And the
yeah.
staff can see pretty clearly what's not working. This.
And you mentioned boards, and I'm like, boards have their whole ecosystem of power dynamics and politics, and it's kind of like, while you might not be in that every day, you best be aware of what's going on so you can kind of find your footing when you interact with the board.
That's right. That's right. And look, it's tough. A lot of boards are unpaid. These are
Yeah.
unpaid. And then you've got to wonder, okay, do you really have the time to devote to helping us move this vision forward, as a volunteer board? It's tough because usually they have their own organizations to manage. They may also be running nonprofits. They may also be in senior level positions in other organizations.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, with the political climate and, whether or not these organizations, these nonprofits are federally funded, a lot of that has gone away. And a lot of organizations have had to think about what's in their future. What does their future look like?
Yeah. If you're talking to a CEO or a chief of staff who's working with the board where there's politics swirling around, maybe you've got some unpaid seats, maybe you have some people who are very vested and interested in how the company is doing, what advice would you give them just in terms of like navigating that whole dynamic?
The tough thing is managing those relationships individually if you
Mm,
can. Look, relationships are very important. They're very critical. I learned that very early in my career. If you can spend time with each board member, do it. And I know it's a lot of work. I know that some of these boards are, 10, 20 people. I don't care. Do it. Because the more work you do on the front end will save you on the back end. The deeper the relationships are that you build, the easier it is to navigate the personalities
mm.
and manage information flow to your boss, whether it's an executive director or CEO. You could also be, the problem solver for all of the issues that come up because you're already aware of them. You can try to prevent them, or you'll be better positioned to work through them when they come up.
Yeah. And I always say, for chiefs of staff, build the foundation with the relationships with your principal, with the ELT, partly so that you can challenge and you can have tough conversations later on. So if you do that like right out the gate, and it's nothing else but just challenge, you're going to have a certain dynamic. But if you set that foundation up front and take the time, then you're able to do that within a safe kind of space. On the flip side, if you're talking to a board member or a CEO who's like, look, I want to have emotional intelligence. I want to have empathy. I want to ask how people are doing and really mean it. And I also need this team to perform at a high level. I mean, you can carry both things at the same time, but I'm wondering how you advise people or kind of what your philosophy is around that.
I always like to ask board members, why are you on this board? Right? Or is it just to add board member of X
Yeah.
organization to your to your resume,
Yeah.
your profile? Because look, these nonprofits are, some of them are struggling. During those times, during those critical times in crises, you need board members to step up in different ways, whether it's raising more money or reaching out to the right people or tapping into their personal networks that they themselves have built throughout their careers. And so I always like to ask, why are you on this board? I think that's an interesting question because either they're going to be passionate about the issue, passionate about the organization, and if they don't know, then yeah, maybe it's time to take a look at this board member and replace that person at some point.
And just like a little side note here, lots of people, I think, believe that, oh, I have to be of a certain caliber or certain place in my career to be on a board. And oftentimes boards are looking for like passionate people who like maybe have some experience in this area, but it's not necessarily a certain profile or mold. I'm just wondering what your thoughts or experience are with that.
Yeah, I a lot of the boards that I have seen, I've seen some really great boards. I have. There's some great boards. I think the ones that struggle are the ones where they have no criteria
Hmm.
for their board. Period. I'm actually working with a couple of nonprofits where they're trying to rebuild their boards, and they've never established, what it takes to be a board member for this
Oh,
organization.
well,
Well, that's the start, right? There's no onboarding. You don't have a philosophy. You don't have committees and responsibilities laid out. So a lot of board members don't know what their roles should be, what their roles are.
that's
That's tough.
yeah, that's tough. Yeah. When you don't know what you're trying to do or how you're trying to do it, that's tough. So your book, The Power Play Journal, who is that for? Who does that help?
Oh my gosh. There's a part of me that wants to say it's for everyone. Technically, it is. When I was writing that book, I was thinking of my colleagues at the time, working in national politics. I was with the political committee. And a lot of people, it's easy I'm not, that's wrong. I'm not going to say it's easy. I was going to say it's easy to be promoted in politics. That is not true. I think that if you are in any organization and you're a trustworthy person and you do good work, you are going to get promoted. If you communicate well, which is one of the highest levels of value in many organizations, communication. If you communicate well, you will get promoted. But there's always a missing piece. There's always management training that's missing. It's like, hey, you did really well on this. Let's promote you and give you this opportunity. But it's like, okay, they've never managed anyone before. Now they're managing 12 people.
Different skill set.
12 people, not 10, 12. And so if you've never exercised that muscle, you've never managed a project involving multiple people, if you don't have the self awareness to know what makes you tick as an employee, what's going to make others tick, and hold on, what's going to make them tick when you speak to them. Some people have multiple personalities when they're managing. They're one way with this group, they're another way with this group. They may have closer ties to someone else because remember they're going from promotions, they're going from peer to manager, and that's a struggle. Some people struggle with now being the boss and what are my friends going to think of me now. Do I have to treat them? I have to act differently? I'm the boss now, but I can't act differently with them because they're going to think X of me. Those are really tough to reconcile. So when I was writing that book, I was trying to think of ways where I could be really tough and make people self-reflect at the end of each strategy I discuss, but also think of it logically. What are the skills that you need when you become a leader? Strategic planning, you got to be resilient, you got to be ethical, right? You have to think about the legacy that you're building, throughout your career. And so there's a part of me that believes it's kind of an instruction manual for anyone that wants to go into leadership. Whether you're in politics, in a nonprofit, or look, if you are the manager at Chick-fil-A, right? You're managing a line, you're managing people, right? And so, yeah, it's for anyone who's aspiring to lead or who's already in those positions and needs support.
Very cool. So it kind of sounds like I like the self-reflection part where it's like, hey, take just a dedicated time at the end of each chapter or section to think about what are my strengths and what are my growth areas, because so many people skip that step and just don't understand themselves and then go out into the world and wonder why things happen. So I like that you have dedicated pieces at the end of each section for that. Yeah, and it's kind of like a tool book or a toolkit for people going out into new levels of leadership or new levels of power. Is that fair, accurate to say?
Absolutely. Like there's the probably the most lengthy chapter in the book is strategic planning. If you can't vision your future and how to build that capacity to get to that future, it's going to be tough as a leader. Especially, in nonprofit, you're dealing with the board. They want to know what's your vision. What are we doing for the next 3 to 5 years? And if you don't have answers for that, if you haven't had those thoughts, if you're just dealing with the day to day and you don't take time to step back and plan for the future, what are you doing this for? What are your goals?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
The
so,
Power Play Journal. And then you also have group coaching. So just a little touch on that. Who would benefit from your group coaching program?
yes. So I got to tell you, a lot of what I built was based on past voids for myself throughout my career. Coming up in my career, I did not have many mentors. I didn't really have a mentor until I got to the Senate. And so before working in the Senate, I had already been working like 10, 12 years. And so when I started building this group coaching program, it's called Pivot to Power. One of the things I wanted to reconcile was the effective performance of employees and impactful leadership, right? And so I'm walking into these organizations with my CEO coaching clients or organizational management clients, and then I'm talking to staff. It's like we're talking about the same organization, but we're talking about two different organizations. Possible, okay? The leaders of these organizations have one idea of how the organization is doing and how they feel about the staff. The staff has a totally different view of where the organization is going, what they should be. So there's like no clarity. So I'm like, how do you reconcile that? Okay. And so I built Pivot to Power to try to close that gap.
Ah,
And basing it on emotional intelligence, having a junior level program with professionals who can get monthly group coaching, right? And then there's a portal with some recorded content. But then I have a 90-day accelerator called Strategic Focus. These are the people that are working closely with the C-suite or with the C-suite or are trying to get there, and what it's going to take to get there. So there's a lot of conflict management. There's a lot of there. It's live hot seat group coaching and consulting on a weekly basis. The reason I built the program that way, and I've had people tell me you're going to burn out. I'm like, no, I'm not. This is necessary because I've been in other coaching programs myself. You're a coach, you've done this too. I hate when I have a question and someone tells me to go read module whatever.
yes. Yeah, yeah.
It's like, answer my question right now. It, and the reason I structured it this way is the reality is people are in crises. If you look on TikTok, people are crying every day. People are in their car praying before they go to work. People need a space to sit with people that are going through the same thing they're going through, that they have the same challenges. They need to hear from each other and build community. They also need advice and support on the spot. One of the things I added to the program later this year, was AI support. So I have my own bot. Her name's Shelly. Like having Tinna Jackson in your back pocket, because people have issues in the middle of the night, and I'm not going to wake up in the middle of the night because I can choose now. So they can use Shelly and get some of their questions answered. And then I have what's called an inner circle for my CEO clients. The way I structured this inner circle is that they can actually bring along someone in the strategic focus program and the mentorship program as their participation.
Okay.
So it allows them to do a little bit of succession planning through the program.
Beautiful. So you got book, you got programs, you got coaching. Where, if someone's like, oh my gosh, I need to reach out to Tinna, I need to join one of these programs or at least check out her book, where is the best place to find all that information?
Awesome. So the book is on Amazon. It's the Power Play Journal: Battle Tested Strategies for Impactful Leadership. And I'm on LinkedIn, Tinna Jackson. I'm on everything as Tinna Jackson. So Tina with two N's.
Tina with
That's
two N's. That's
Tina with
right.
two.
We'll have all that in the show notes as well. But Tina, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciated the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.